Hello, CCC, the principal unmasked Chiro X Travaganza, 125 years of chiropractic, 1895 to 2020, and who knew 2020 would be a year like none other. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am in a minute, but I want to prelude what my talk is going to be today, or my presentation. It's living beyond your wildest genes, epigenetics, and the chiropractic lifestyle. Now, here's the crux of my presentation today. By enhancing our perception of our environment, by maximizing our nervous system through correction of the vertebral subluxation, through chiropractic adjustments, through chiropractic care, then looking at things like how we supplement, how we live, how we think, what we eat, how we love, how we sleep, how we exercise, the chiropractic lifestyle, we can clearly demonstrate DNA repair, a reduction in oxidative stress, increased immunity, increased health outcomes, and even turning on and turning off genes, epigenetics. Yes, this is the power we have in our hands. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am, my story, and we'll segue right into the meat of the presentation. So first off, let me say thank you to the whole CCC and Kendra Becker. I met, because she invited me here, and her husband, Frank. Kendra, I met, I think, 2015, 2016. It was a functional forum Christmas party with James Maskell, and we presented our functional in 5, and we both presented. And subsequently, Kendra's been on my podcast, or our podcast, Beyond Your Wildest Genes, at least 3 times, maybe 4 times, a really, really popular guest. So thank you, and hello, my friends. So here's my story. The first memory, or one of the first memories I had as a child, about 10 years old, was laying out on my parents' pull-out sofa, just screaming in agony, holding my right ear, crying with pain with an inner ear infection. And I became really, really familiar with that pink bubblegum tasting amoxicillin that some of you may still remember, 4, 5, 6 times a year, slurping it off a spoon like a champ, but always getting another infection, another ear infection, strep throat. I wouldn't say I was necessarily sickly, but I had a lot of chronic infections growing up. Then one day, playing baseball, and by the way, I was terrible at baseball. My mother was sitting on those cold, frigid aluminum bleachers watching me play terribly in minor league or little league. Like I said, I was around 10. And she was sitting next to some lady, her name was Mickey, and she was complaining about her low back pain. And this person next to her said, you know what, I work for a great chiropractor in town, you should go see him. So my mom, a lifestyle choice, decided to go see that chiropractor. The chiropractor's name is Dr. Elliot Foster. Maybe some of you might know him, some of you older time chiropractors. Older than 20 years of practicing, which I'm at this point now. But my mother went, she was told the story again, above, down, inside out, took x-rays, nervous system, all the things that we were taught or told, or maybe not told in the beginning. And this resonated with my mother so much, and of course she got better, that she brought my father, my brother, my sister, and me. And I can remember that first time walking down that hallway with my mother, hopping on that table, turning my head to the right, turning my head to the left, getting that adjustment, hopping off, looking up at my mom and saying, man, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Yes, it's true. Walked out, things were great. And I kept going, kept going to the chiropractor, even through my teenage years, making that the first lifestyle decision to live beyond my wildest genes. But early on, what I realized after 6, 8, 7, 9 months, I realized I wasn't getting those ear infections again. In fact, I have never had a chronic ear infection again, where I had to take an antibiotic for 34 years up until 2 weeks ago when I got such a bad inner and middle ear infection, I'm assuming from swimming in the swimming pool, that I had no choice but to take an oral antibiotic. First time in 35 years. But at the same time I was getting adjusted and going, even leaving school at times when I didn't feel right to get adjusted. Dr. Elliott was teaching me, telling me about the nervous system, telling me about above, down, inside out, teaching me about how the nervous system controls and coordinates every organ, cell, and tissue in your body. I remember looking at a poster and asking him, why is disease separated with a hyphen, dis-ease? And he explained that to me. My first kind of change in perception as a young age about what health is, what health means to a person. Another thing he also did was he taught me to become a reader. And the first book he ever recommended to me was Illusions by Richard Bach. And I'm pretty sure Richard Bach's father was Marcus Bach, who I believe did the eulogy for either BJ or DD. So, book after book after book. So now at this point, we could fast forward, because this talk is not about me, 15 to 20 years later, as I'm still a reader, and I pick up the book, one of the books that I consider one of the most important books ever written, that everyone should read. And if you haven't read, please get it. I believe there's a 10th year anniversary, even though the book is about 15 years old, is The Biology of Belief from Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I remember picking that book up, reading it, and just being blown away. What's even greater is Bruce, as you guys know, Dr. Lipton is a champion for chiropractic, which makes it even sweeter. So for those of you, unbelievable. I know it's backwards. Unbelievable book. You must get it. So when Dr. Lipton was teaching, I believe this was in the mid-60s, he was teaching the genetic dogma. But what he was teaching and what he was seeing in the lab was not the same. So in a lab, he had 3 petri dishes with different mediums, different environments, and he had the same stem cell in each. Now, if a stem cell is in the same medium, it'll just reproduce exactly the same over and over and over again. But when he put them in different mediums, in one medium it became a muscle cell, in another medium it became a nerve cell, in another medium it became a fat cell, getting him to change his thoughts about biology, about the genetic dogma. He was working with stem cells. This is the early kind of evolution of epigenetics. And at that time, we thought when the DNA helix was found by Watson and Crick, and then we decoded the entire human genome by Craig Venter and others, it was going to be the end of disease as we knew it. But it didn't. It wasn't. It was nothing more than maybe a pharmaceutical bonanza that has not proven. Now it's important, it's crucial, the science is, but it didn't do what they thought or what we thought it was going to do. And that's because of epigenetics. Now, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into epigenetics, but let me just take one step back. Within our body, we're made of trillions and trillions of cells. Our brain, central nervous system, chiropractors, is the chemist. Our cells are circulated by all sorts of fluid, blood, whatever. That environment determines how the cell is going to react with our central nervous system as the chemist. Absolutely amazing. So what can we say, or what we can go about when we talk about epigenetics? Well, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. Now let's look up a little bit definitions. Dictionary.com defines epigenetics as heritable changes that occur without a change in the DNA sequence, without a change in the DNA sequence. Nature.com defines epigenetics as genetic control by factors other than the DNA sequence. Factors, remember that control. What are the factors? And one of my favorites I'm a big primal fan, paleo fan, been for very, very long. One of my, virtual mentors who I've happened to have the pleasure to interview before, and I'm a primal health coach as well, is Mark Sisson. And he recently defined, and he may have gotten it from somebody else, I'm not sure, as epigenetics as altering the programming language of your genes without altering the sequence itself. So you kind of get the flow here, right? Now, how do you explain this to your patients? Because that's really important. They have to make this epigenetic decision to continue chiropractic care for years or their life, right? So epigenetics, epi means above genes, so above the genes, epigenetics, kind of like when we talk about subluxation, sublux, below the light. Well, epigenetics is above the genes. There's some sort of control above the genes. So what is that? Well, let me define in the best way I can the epigenome. So the epigenome is all the chemical markers that are found attached to our DNA sequence, the collection of them that causes our genes to be turned on or turned off. So that is the entire epigenome. Now there's basically three ways that these turning on and off in genes can happen, right? Number one, and the most common and easiest to explain, is DNA methylation. Other ones that are a little bit more complicated, way above my science brain, is histone acetylation, and then RNA messenger silencing, or something along those lines. I believe RNA silencing. Those are the three, right? Now for DNA methylation, generally turns off a gene, and that's attachment of a C carbon and 3 hydrogens get attached to one of those sequences and turns that gene off. The most common, DNA methylation, and you guys hear methylation all the time, right? Methylation pathways, so on and so forth. Now, I'm a firm believer of the story always wins. So I want to give you a little bit of a story or an example of epigenetics in nature that you can use, that you can share with your patients to show and to how incredible it is. Because I think it's a little bit harder to see in humans, but when you look at something a little bit smaller as a bee, it becomes really, really real. So my father, and probably my brother, and a little bit me, I have my full bee costume in my car. We are beekeepers. My father and brother have 5 beehives. If you're a beekeeper, you know you can't just have one hive. Now, you know that a hive has the queen, and she runs the show, right? And there's basically worker bees and drones, right? Every single bee in a colony has the same genetic sequence. They are all clones. So when there's a new queen, she makes a virgin journey, she flies up in the air, and then the drone, which is basically a sperm with wings, flies up, donates the sperm, the queen comes back down and just starts pumping out eggs after eggs after eggs. And everybody in the hive is genetically the same, but they all have different functions, morphology, jobs, and they look incredibly different. If you look at a queen, she's twice as big or maybe even more than all the other bees. She's huge, humongous. She overwinters, meaning she can live for at least 3 years, and she is just constantly pumping out eggs. The drones, like I said, male with sperm, wings with sperm with wings, and then the worker bees care for the brood, and then they go out and collect the pollen and make the honey and all those kind of things. Well, what is happening here to have the same genetic sequence but 3 different looking bees with 3 different jobs? Well, what they think is when a queen, or when a hive needs a new queen, the bees produce royal jelly. And there's a ton of compounds in royal jelly that people don't really understand, but they believe there's a compound or an enzyme in royal jelly that inhibits DMNT1 methyl transferase. And I believe we have that in our body as well. So what's happening? When this egg cells fed royal jelly, the entire genomic sequence is demethylated. So a queen bee is fully demethylated, fully on. All the workers in the drones have methyl groups attached at specific parts that turn on genes, turn off genes, primarily off genes, and make them look different, act different, and have different functions. When I read that a couple of years ago, I was totally blown away. And then I forgot about it. And then when I was doing this presentation and working on this presentation, I remembered at it, Googled it, and did some research, and I wanted to share that with you today. So let's flip back now to chiropractic. Sound good? Now we know there are at least two ways where chiropractic care can affect genetic mechanisms, right? So number one is the study 2005, one of my favorites. And maybe there's some people who haven't heard this before. Maybe everybody in the audience has heard it. Maybe there's some criticism. I don't know, but I think it's a wonderful study. Vertebral subluxation, the Journal of Vertebral Subluxation, 2005. It's the serum thiol study, or it's a study that shows chiropractic can affect DNA repair and oxidative stress. So that's number one. And number two, take this right from the master, Dr. Christopher Kent. He says, subluxation distorts the way we perceive our environment, compromising the way we can respond. And of course, I didn't say that as good as he could. Compromises the way we respond to it. Those are the two ways. So let me just talk a little bit about the latter first. For years and years and years in my office, I've talked about this idea of GIGO or GIGO, G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. Sometimes it's got to be a little bit sensitive. You know, you could say jumbled information in, jumbled information out, but the GIGO or garbage in, garbage out comes from the computer world. If you input garbage or jumbled information into a computer, you're going to get garbage or jumbled information back. Well, the same thing happens in humans. If you can't perceive the environment properly through your eyes, through your nervous system, through all the sensors on your skin, and you're getting jumbled information in, you can only expect to get jumbled information out. And this is how I explained to my patients and the young kids I've seen over the years, the speech delayed kids, and after I adjusted them, one adjustment sometimes, they started change, their vocabulary changed almost instantaneously, where they started talking and talking more, and it just increased exponentially after that, because these kids were not experiencing the environment properly through their nervous system, through the subluxation, and by correcting that, released that innate intelligence and allowed them to start gaining their verbal skills. Maybe you can use that as well. So that's the second one. But the first one was from the Journal of Vertebral Subluxation, serum thiol study. Really interesting. I believe this was supported by the University of London, CLA, Dr. Pachin Tempo, Dr. Christopher Kent, where, a bit of some work done years ago in the old Renaissance days, I believe from Dr. Ron Perot, where they took three groups of people. They took one group of short-term chiropractic care patients, 25 of them. They took people under long-term chiropractic care. I think it was 21 people, which in long-term could be defined as 2 years or more. And then they took another group, I think 30 people that had no experience with chiropractic at all. And then they measured something called serum thiol, which is a very strong antioxidant, and it could be a surrogate measure for DNA repair. And they saw that people under long-term chiropractic care regained their health much quicker, so on and so forth. The people under short-term care had higher levels than those that had no chiropractic care experience whatsoever. And I can remember sitting, it was either in front of a computer screen, and it wasn't a flat screen for sure, or my TV, and seeing this getting scrolled along the main ticker on the bottom of the screen. It's something along the effects of, chiropractic care can affect DNA mechanisms or DNA repair. And it should be talked about more. It should be replicated and should be done on a bigger scale, of course. So just remember that again. Vertebral subluxation distorts the way we perceive the environment and compromises the way we respond to it. This is absolutely epigenetics. and the chiropractic lifestyle. Correct? Without a doubt. So let's take a little bit of a turn, and not so much. Now, I'm not sure, I'm sure most of these people, you guys listening, you docs, you chiros, are from Connecticut, and I believe you can sell nutritional supplements. But in my office and in my personal life, I've been supplementing with omega-3s, DHA, and EPA for years. My kids get it, I get it. We have a couple different brands in the office because I think it's one of the most important supplements to take. And I know it's not a supplement talk, for a variety of reasons. Inflammation, balancing our omega-3 to other fat ratios, so on and so forth. And I'm a big fan of triglyceride forms as opposed to ethyl ester forms. They're just more bioavailable, they're closer to nature, and of course it's fermented cod liver oil, so on and so forth. There's better options. And I also teach my patients to eat at least 1 pound of cold water fish a week, and I got that recommendation straight from Chris Kresser, who's a great functional medicine doc. Interestingly enough, again, one of the companies I buy some of my supplements from are Emerson Ecologics, and they sent out an email years ago, and thank God I kept it. It was like omega-3s and the epigenetic influence of omega-3 supplementation. The epigenetic influence of omega-3 supplementation. If you want to see that, just Google that, it'll come right up. And since then, since 2017, there's been articles on omega-3s and epigenetics in Clinical Lipidology, the American Journal of Nutrition, the Clinical Journal of Nutrition, Clinical Epigenetics. So this is, kind of cutting edge research. But in 2017, there was the Omega D study that showed and proved, double blind, placebo, blah, 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 that the Omega D, OMEG, capital AD study in 2017, if you want to look it up, that supplementation with omega-3s decreases DNA methylation, turning off genes, and then also enhances genetic expression, and it's measured by concentrations of messenger RNA. So really, 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 really cool stuff. Now, when I think about, omega-3s, I think about the nervous system, I think about the brain, and I think it fits in perfectly with the chiropractic lifestyle. That's why I think you should supplement and suggest it to your patients. Whether you suggest it or carry it, either or have them eat it through food sources. Because we know when we eat adequate amounts of omega-3s, they get directly incorporated into our cellular membranes. And let's not forget that our brain is 60 to 70% fat as well. But in terms of the cell itself, these omega-3s get incorporated into the cell membrane, and they help with, protein and gene exchange and expression. They help with getting nutrients in the cell and waste out of the cell. And we know environment around the cell creates epigenetic changes. So it's so important to consume the right amount of fats, again, fitting perfectly into the chiropractic lifestyle. Now, what I find and what I'm making the assumption is the same, and I don't think it's an assumption at all, that if we don't eat the right types of fats, if we're eating enormous amounts of trans fatty acids, if we're eating a lot of polyunsaturated fats like soy, corn, safflower, so on and so forth, instead of the omega-3s and healthy saturated fats getting integrated into our cellular membranes, into our brain and so forth, our brain has to use fat. Our body has to use it. Our innate intelligence has to use some sort of fat. So it starts building these cellular membranes with fats that aren't ideal. Our body doesn't know what to do with trans fatty acids. It's not real. Or it integrates the polyunsaturated fats, and the cell stops functioning like it's supposed to, right? So that's a scary thought, considering most people's omega-3 to omega-6 ratios is like 30 to 1. There's ways to test. Mine personally is 3 to 1, and I think the paleo ancestors were anywhere from 1 to 1 to 3 to 1. But, the greatest, in my mind, the greatest dietary nutritional transgression that was basically forced upon us erroneously, starting a long time ago with Ansel Keys and so on and so forth, was this low-fat paradigm. It hurt us in so many ways. Remember, our brain, myelin sheath, cell membranes are all made out of fat. And if we don't consume the right fats, our cells are going to be made up of the wrong fats, the greatest dietary transgression. Now, if you ask people, you ask your patients, or you may think like, what's the worst thing to eat? Most of us would think, sugar is terrible. But you know what, unless we have raging diabetes, when we consume sugar, our body just metabolizes it, it gets out of our system, we have a bad response and it's gone. Well, fats aren't the same. They get integrated into our bodies and it takes a hell of a lot to get them out. And I'd be lying to tell you guys if I didn't consume some sort of omega-6s and I didn't love French fries. But those are the worst foods to consume because what they do to your body, the ill health, the inflammation they create, and how they affect epigenetic mechanisms within our cells. So supplementation is important, and omega-3s is a great example of that, without a doubt. Now let's talk a little bit about chiropractic and immunity. Now, in this new world we live in, this COVID-19 world, this SARS-CoV-2 world, there's a few things we know without a doubt about this virus. There's such conflicting information, it's confusing the hell out of everybody. But one of the things we do know is metabolic health is paramount, right? Absolutely paramount, right? Metabolic health, metabolic markers. Are you thin? Are you not overweight? Do you eat well? Do you exercise? Is your heart rate right? Is your blood pressure? All those different indicators. And we know that this has huge outcomes in you surviving, or maybe not even being symptomatic at all. Well, chiropractic can play a huge role in immunity, creating more health through our lifestyle choices, through epigenetic choices. That's what changes metabolic health, is making the right lifestyle choices. Now, over the years, there have been some studies, and I know there's more studies, and I'm going to use a few examples, and a lot of these examples have come under a lot of fire, unfortunately, for people in our own profession, which really breaks my heart, really upsets me. But it just goes to show that we need more research. We need more things like the Journal of Vertebral Subluxation and Matt McCoy to help further, whether it's a case study, whether it's larger studies. But we need to show these in bigger, broader, huger studies. And I know that all costs money. I'm aware. But one of the examples I've used for years and years, way before COVID-19. And I think the first article I wrote was, did the Spanish flu of 1918 save chiropractic? And everybody here now, and most of the world now, has been reminded of the Spanish flu of 1918, because that flu killed zillions of people worldwide. And there have been a lot of epidemiological studies looking at places in like Iowa and other places where that people who were under chiropractic care at time survived at a much greater rate. And there's a lot of different numbers and a lot of different ones I've seen over the years. But in Iowa, it was like, 97,000 people were treated by medical doctors, and 6,000 of them died. 1 in 15 under standard medical care, whatever that was back then. And in those, there was like 4,000 chiropractic patients that were cared by chiropractors that had this flu, and something like 6 died, 1 in 15. I've seen other numbers where the overall death rate for people who got the Spanish flu was 5%, and those under chiropractic care were 0.25%, so that's a 20% better odds than if you were under medical care. Now, that's 102 years ago. who knows? But it can still serve as an example and an explanation on how the chiropractic lifestyle can enhance your immunity, even in times of great distress that we're going through right now. Now, like I said, the Spanish flu had something along those lines of a 5% death rate. Well, this COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, the numbers are anywhere now between 0.25 and 1%. Could you imagine what the media would be like and we'd be going through if this COVID-19 had a 5% death rate? Holy mackerel. And I mentioned his name before. Another study that I like to talk about is the 2011 Ron Perot, P-E-R-O study, where he looked at 107 patients and he looked at immune competency. He looked at measuring IgA. So, our body creates antibodies when we're sick, when we're unhealthy, all sorts of IgA. You know the gist. And it was shown that people under chiropractic care had 139% greater response in their IgA production than people not under chiropractic care. He also looked and saw that people that were under chiropractic care had a 200% higher functioning immune system and a 400% better functioning immune system than those who were sick with very chronic diseases like cancer. Now, I know the study has come under fire because it didn't take into account nutrition and other lifestyle factors, and that's part of the problem, because when you have a chiropractic patient and a long-term chiropractic patient, they're usually doing all of the chiropractic lifestyle epigenetic interventions. Like they're interested in sleep, they're interested in diet, they're interested in how to exercise and the best way to sleep, the best way to supplement. They're interested in keeping thin and trim and not being overweight. They're interested in increasing muscle mass. So it makes some of these studies difficult. I am aware, but again, it can give you a framework to discuss with your patients how important chiropractic care and the chiropractic lifestyle is. And what I love, in 2005, we already discussed it, the serum thiol study. They're measuring people, chiropractic patients versus non-chiropractic patients, just again showing us as chiropractors that we need to do a better job and get more people on our tables and adjusting them, maximizing our life expression through the correction of the vertebral subluxation, and then if you choose, teaching them the chiropractic lifestyle. I know, repetitive, but it's that important, because the chiropractic lifestyle, the epigenetic lifestyle, living beyond your wildest genes, is the way out of metabolic derangement. It's the way out of this sick care and into a true health care system. And again, it starts in our hands. Not quite going to wrap this up yet, but want to talk about love. Now, you might be thinking, how does love fit into this whole picture of epigenetics? And I have to thank my partner, one of my partners, Dr. Wanda Lee McPhee. A lot of this information is taken from a talk she did and one of the summits that our company Beyond Our Wildest Genes was invited to. And it's basically about love and epigenetics and the nervous system. And I will be definitely channeling my inner John D. Martini as well. For those who have ever taken or done the breakthrough experience, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it for sure. And all his other programs, by the way, or all his other audios and videos for sure. Now, love, let's face it, love right now in this crazy COVID-19 world and our new world order we live in. And I have to thank Frank Usanti for me, and heard that him say it first, and I've used it a couple times, but we're living in a new world now, folks. We keep saying, and I keep saying, I want to get back to normal. Well, without a doubt, there is a new norm, and love has to be at the top of the list. Why? Well, let's look at it a little bit neurologically as well. When we're in the state of love, we're balanced. Our autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic, rest and digest, is in balance. Our sympathetic, our flight or fight, is balanced. Those two systems are creating neurotransmitters in the state of love that bathe our cells, that create genetic expression, or the proper genetic expression, right, in a balanced way. What I love about this is that you can, measure the balance of your autonomic nervous system through HRV, and I know there's a couple ways, more than a couple ways to do that. Whether it's a simple Oura ring, whether it's the CLA, pulse wave profiler, whether it's Whoop, so on and so forth. You can now measure HRV in a much easier fashion, basically showing a balance between our autonomic nervous system. Now, in fact, the opposite of love is infatuation, right? Infatuation is an imbalance in our nervous system. We're either in a hyper parasympathetic state, which is not a state you want to be in, right? Where we're storing fat, so on and so forth. A parasympathetic state, I think we need to all be more in, because I think we're all in a sympathetic state these days, but you don't want to be in a hyper parasympathetic state, right? And an example of that would be being regretful of the past, right? The opposite in infatuation would be a hypersympathetic state, unbalanced, right? Not a state of wholeness. And there we, again, through a neurotransmitter cascade, create different sympathetic neurotransmitters that eventually reach our cells, that eventually allow them to express the genes in a over sympathetic way, right? Tiger chasing you. And that's infatuation. That's not a state we're in. That's an imbalanced state. As chiropractors, we always talk about balance, correct? I know I do. Whether it's simply balanced standing or balancing your nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system is the perfect leeway to explain that. Remember, sympathetic system controls all the things you think about, right? If you're chased, you run it, or you're mind racing, and the proverbial getting chased by a tiger. On the parasympathetic, rest or digest, all the things you don't think about, right? But love and infatuation, two sides of the coin. In love, it's a state of wholeness, a state of balance, a state that you want to be in. And in this state, I believe you could make proper choices. In the state of infatuation, it is totally unbalanced, where you'll have the potential to make poor choices and definitely be in a lesser state of health. Now, in love, you see positives with the negatives being in state of balance. You see challenge and support at the same time, the yin and the yang of just about everything, and it causes a balance. In infatuation, we see the positives and not the negatives. We see support without challenge, creating an imbalanced state. Now, as chiropractors, we talk constantly about balance. Well, why not share with your patients love? Because I believe, many people believe, that love is the absolute optimal epigenetic state or situation for sure. Remember, positives without negatives, support without challenge, or seeing the positives and the negatives and understanding that, and seeing support and challenge and the balance. And I'll never forget sitting through that, 2-day breakthrough experience and getting this first hand. And our body in those states will create chemicals that bathe our cells that'll dictate how they function. Right? We talked about omega-3s, correct? Yes, we did. And we talked about the cellular membrane. Well, taking this almost full circle, we talked about the biology of belief, right? If you haven't read it, huge plug. Thank you, Dr. Bruce Lipton, one of the best books ever written. In that book, he talks about the true brain of the cell. And we're talking about the cellular membrane. Well, in the nucleus, as we know, as chiropractors, the DNA material is stored there. And by no means is poo-pooing how important the nucleus is, right? But the interface from the environment to the inner workings of the cell is the cellular membrane, or what he called the magical membrane, making the cellular membrane the true brain of the cell. That interacts with those neurotransmitters created when you're in an imbalanced state or in a balanced state. That cellular membrane interacts with the blood and the other chemicals around that cell to get your cells, your trillions of cells, to function properly when you're exercising properly, when you're eating properly, or most importantly, when you're getting your vertebral subluxations corrected and your nervous system maintained by a principled chiropractor. Now, taking this full circle, I started the story, full circle. I started this story about talking about my mother. Remember, she was the one, my mom, Eve, I love you, Mom. She was the one that first took me to the chiropractor when I was 10 or 12, right? And that changed the course of my life and ultimately the course of thousands and thousands of people's lives in my community, and then even more so through Beyond Your Wildest Genes, where we've had millions of downloads of our podcast, because she decided to take that jump, that crazy jump, to bring your kids to see the chiropractor, and she did so. Now, this was prior to Beyond Your Wildest Genes. I was working, and at that time I was at my professional high, really doing great, cranking out, and I could remember getting a phone call. Hey, it's Mom. Mom's having some agonizing pain in her side of her body. We're bringing her to the hospital. Okay, and I can remember a couple weeks before that, she said, man, no, I'm really, really constipated. And I was telling her, just eat a bunch of pineapple, you'll be okay. And they brought her to the hospital. This was, I believe, February 19th, like 17, 18 years ago. And they did some scans overnight. And I got the call again in my office saying, they see something in your mother's colon. They see some spots on her liver. We're going to do more tests. Lo and behold, my mother had 4th stage colon cancer that already metastasized to her liver. And it ended up just being 30 days. And every time I tell the story, I get chills. It ended up being 30 days, maybe a few more days, or maybe not. February 19th to March 20th, 30 days from diagnosis to death. She only got to see one of her 9 grandkids. My dad was happily married to my mom for 30 years, and she passed at the young age of 52. Now this sparked an enormous fire in me, and it just ramped up how I saw things, how I took care of people in my community, the talks I did, the presentations I did, and for a while, at one point I was sitting in a lecture hall with a presenter, and he was talking about the summit model, and I came back and I said, I sat in a chair with my partner, Dr. Mike Akinfor, and I said, Mike, we can do this. We can do something chiropractically, incorporating the other aspects of health and bring it out to the world. And we did, and we had our first summit, the Pain Relief Project, National Solutions that actually work. And we talked a lot about chiropractic. We had people on like Dane Donahue and Patrick Gentempo and Christopher Kent, and it was a Plasker. There was at least 11 chiropractors out of 20-something guests, and that was the start of us being able to share our message, the chiropractic lifestyle, to tons and tons of people, and in using epigenetics and lifestyle and the chiropractic lifestyle as that backdrop. And partly that was because there was a fire lit in me from my mother's death, and in being surrounded by incredible people. My office, or our office at 734 Broadway in Bayonne, and Dr. Mike and Maris, Charlie, my accountability group, Matt, Wanda Lee, Mike, and Tammy, and then being surrounded by my family, and it allowed us to create something bigger to share with the world. So I remember I've shared this ending at the functional forum as well, and I started this discussion there at that point as well. On the first day of college, I went to Montclair State University, a local college, state college in New Jersey, and I decided to stay there. It was only like 15 miles from my house, but I felt that it needs to grow up a little bit. And the first day I walked into my dorm room, and there's like a gift basket, and there's this, placard on it, and it was kind of like a pinkish color placard. And on one side, it said, "Welcome Noah DeCoyer, Freeman Hall, room 314. And on the back of it, it said, now, this isn't the exact paper. I had the exact paper in my wallet for over 20 years, and then I lost my whole wallet. I do have a picture of it, but I still have a printed copy of it in my wallet. And on the back of that card, it says, "Today begins a new chapter for you. Go for it as you always have. We love you. Mom, Dad, Jeff, and Laura." Now, my final message to all of you as I start tearing up is, you know the power that each one of us has in our hands. You know the power of chiropractic. Sometimes we forget, and it's easy to forget. We just get into the rhythm day in and day out. But using epigenetics above the genes, teaching the chiropractic lifestyle, correcting that vertebral subluxation in whoever walks through that door, and go for it, because every single day is a new day. Now, don't forget about the studies we talked about. Don't forget about proper supplementation. Don't forget about chiropractic and immunity. I know you won't. Don't forget your homework. If you haven't, read The Biology of Belief and the start of epigenetics and stem cells. Don't forget about love and how important love is in this circumstances right now. I expected to be in front of a big group of people and be a little bit more animated, but this is what you guys got from me today. If you have any comments, questions, ideas, thoughts, criticisms, please help me become a better presenter. That is very, very important to me. I mentioned a lot of different studies. You easily just, whatever I said, just Google them. They'll go right to those studies without a doubt, for sure. I wanted to say a huge thank you to the Chiropractic Connecticut Council. I follow your work, and a lot of you out there are my friends in a variety of different chiropractic forums and in person, my buddies as well. You guys, I'm from New Jersey. You guys support us in New Jersey, and we support you guys as well. You know that through the ANJC. I want to thank Kendra for inviting me, and for Frank and Patricia for taking some of my random weird emails and questions. I want to thank my wife and my kids for just being my biggest supporters and support group. I want to thank my partners at 734 Broadway. I love you guys, Mike, Maris, and Dr. Charlie. And I want to thank my partners from Beyond Your Wildest Genes, Wanda Lee and Mike. And I want to thank my accountability group that I meet every week with at 9 o'clock every Tuesday. Thanks for keeping me in check. And this is another conversation for another day. But if you don't have an accountability group, get 2, 3, 4 like-minded chiropractors, or maybe not chiropractors, and meet every single week. And if you want ideas on how to do that, I will help you along the way as well. It has changed my life. Thanks, guys. Love you. And as I finish every single thing I do, be awesome and never unawesome. Bye.